theyeshiva.net.
I am so honored to be part of this incredible and vital initiative, to be part of the Mental Health Awareness Day for the Australian Jewish community. I feel privileged and honored to have been invited to be here with you, so many of my dear friends and brothers and sisters in this extraordinary, glorious Jewish community of Australia, to discuss this vital and critical topic. And let me begin with a story that was once shared by a close friend of our family. He was a close friend of my father, the very famous Nobel Prize laureate, the late Elie Wiesel, Professor Eliezer Wiesel of blessed memory, who was a survivor of Auschwitz and Buchenwald. And he once shared, he was born and he grew up in a city called Sighet. He said he had a friend, a youth, who was one of those mavakshim, one of those spiritual seekers, an existentialist soul who was always asking questions like, why was I born, and why are we here, and what's the meaning and purpose and destination of existence? And every sage and rabbi and scholar who would come to town, this youth would always confront him and say, please help me understand the mystery of life. What is my purpose? Why was I born? Why did God create the world? Why is there a need for existence? These questions simply did not let this young man rest. And one day, a great rabbi, a great spiritual master, a great Rebbe came to town to Sighet, and of course this youngster came and said, Rebbe, please answer this question. For years I've been looking for an answer. Why? Why did God create us? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? And the spiritual master looked at him, smacked him in his face. He said, Rebbe, master, what did I do wrong? Why are you slapping me? I'm just looking for an answer to this great question. And this master looks at him and says, why do you want to ruin such a good question with some superficial answer? You know, it's the answers that divide us. It's the questions that unite us. The story may have many layers, but let me tell you one aspect that I took out of the story. We become most united in our vulnerability, in our questions, in the awareness that we don't know, that we have so much to learn and discover, and that we're all weak and mortal and frail and mushy, and we've all made mistakes, and we all make mistakes. I was once attending a 12-step program for addicts who were in recovery. And the atmosphere was incredibly inspiring. And one of the addicts, he asked me, he says, Rabbi Jacobson, why is it that at these recovery meetings I always feel the presence of spirituality and God in such an intense way? And I said, you know, the Kotzker Rebbe once asked his disciples, where is God? And they said, oh, everywhere. He said, nah. God is wherever you let him in. Which means, of course, God is everywhere, but where can I experience God? Only in those places where I let him in. And where and how do I let him in? And the answer is when I suspend my ego, when I suspend my fakeness, my superficiality, when I don't have to hide behind emotional and psychological defenses, when I can be real, raw, vulnerable, naked, authentic, when we as a community can be vulnerable, can be real, when we can expose our weaknesses, our flaws, our failures, our mistakes, and the fact that all of us are searching. All of us have questions. None of us know all the answers. None of us can wrap our brains around all of reality, which is mysterious in its infinite grandeur and in its profound layers of meaning that defy human finite imagination and comprehensibility. And I looked at this person and I said, you know, every person sitting here in this meeting has destroyed his or her life. Their lives have been shattered in one way or another. There's no ego here. There's no arrogance. There's no haughtiness. There's no superiority complex of holier than thou or better than thou. There are humble people who are open. Their hearts are open. And that's where you'll always find God. Because the greatest obstacle, the greatest blockage to the presence of infinity is the fakeness, the egotism, the foolish arrogance, the superficiality, the making believe, that I have it figured out. The inability just to be real, just to be vulnerable, just to be raw. Because when I get rid of that superficiality, my true soul can emerge. The inner presence of life can emerge. And that's where we become one. We, the Jewish people, have created amazing communities in the last half a century, in the last century. Take a look at Australia. Every time I had the privilege of visiting Australia before Corona, I visited quite a few times. I always came home enthralled, inspired to see what your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, what you have accomplished over the last 70, 80 years as the Holocaust survivors began settling Australia and built such amazing families and such incredible communities and such a powerful and beautiful and glorious infrastructure. All types of institutions there for people. Social institutions and religious institutions. Educational institutions. Institutions that are dedicated to Jewish continuity and to Israel and to Jewish pride and to Jewish dignity. It's really incredible and amazing. And look what the Jewish people have accomplished in Israel and in America and all over the diaspora communities. But there's something else we have to tackle. It's called denial. Denial is not only a river in Egypt, it's part of people's lives. It's hard for us to face our vulnerabilities, and there's a reason for it. We perhaps have felt that our main focus has to be building and rebuilding and making sure those communities are strong, and we did not want to expose to ourselves or to others the many vulnerabilities. Maybe we felt guilty. We felt that this will destroy that which has been built with so much blood and sweat, tears and sacrifice. We have to create perfect families and perfect communities. And if you dare expose our vulnerabilities and make breaches in our fortresses, we will destroy you. So a lot of things we shoved under the rug. I'm not judging anybody. I'm explaining that there may have actually been idealistic reasons for this. And you know what? There may be something else as well. So many of our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents have suffered so much. We simply didn't have the resilience to be able to address all of our traumas and all of our wounds. The commandment became rebuild, get married, create a beautiful family, be successful, make money, contribute. And it's amazing. Look at the miracle. We are here. They have chosen life instead of death, continuity instead of stagnation, family instead of isolation, community instead of detachment. That's incredibly inspiring. But there's one more frontier to confront, and that is our inner state, our inner consciousness, our inner emotional well-being. And that's why such conferences are so important, so vital, and so critical, because too many of us have suffered in silence for too long. And I think we need to open ourselves up to a new conversation. That new conversation is happening slowly, but we need to embrace it with more courage, with more dignity, and with more compassion. The first thing is we have to be able to talk about things that we were not comfortable talking about. We were not comfortable talking about mental illness. There's a stigma. We were not comfortable talking about so many of us dealing and suffering from depression, from anxiety, from codependency, from a negative self-image, addiction, drugs, overdose, suicide. The inner conversation of what stress is doing to us, to our nervous system, of unresolved wounds, especially abuse, trauma, molestation, rape. All of these things that it felt much better to say, these things are not really rampant in our communities. We need to talk about it. We must talk about it. Too many people have died. Too many people have overdosed. Too many people are suffering, and suffering without support. We need to transcend the stigma of this conversation. You know, all of us know how to empathize, accept, respect, honor, love patients who are physically ill. We go out of our way. There's no community in the world like the Jewish people when it comes to visiting the sick, supporting the sick, helping the sick and their families. But when it comes to a different type of illness, when it comes to emotional illness, mental illness, many of us shut down. People who struggle with mental challenges, chemical disorders, depression, all forms of mental illness, and all forms of trauma, which express themselves in so many different ways, from psychosis to bipolar disorder to borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, depression, terrible stress and anxiety in all forms of manifestations. Many of these people feel that if anyone finds out the truth about them, they will be shunned. They don't even tell the truth to themselves. And conversation is so important. Exposure is so important in the sense that I can talk about my emotions. I could find connection within my reality. But they feel they can't talk to anyone. They are frightened. They are alone. Nobody will lend them an ear or a heart. Nobody will be here for them. So in so many people's minds, we blame them for their problems. One boy suffering from a mental illness once told me, he said, my father told me the other day, just snap out of your issues and get back to normal living. Enough with your drama. This is tragic. People don't choose these types of challenges. They are a result of God's choices, not people's choices. And what people need most is the feeling that they are not victims of the devil, destined to live a miserable life. They are powerful neshamas. They are powerful souls that can bring in light into the abyss of darkness. Our profound acceptance, respect, and affection for a struggling person helps the person empower himself or herself and see themselves from another vantage point. I heard the following episode from the person it happened to. There was a young woman struggling with very deep mental anguish and mental anxiety and was diagnosed as mentally ill. She was suicidal and she attempted a few times to kill herself. After a long ordeal and hospitalization and much advice from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, her mother went to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he thanked him for schlepping her out of her deep darkness. The Rebbe responded, she was not in a dark place where I needed to take her out from. She was in no dark place that I needed to take her out from. When she left the hospital, the Rebbe wrote to her, from now on, you should continue to serve God with joy and with a full, vibrant heart. Trust me, the Rebbe knew very well the seriousness of her condition. He was deeply involved in the whole process, even in the electric shock treatment that was given to her. But I think the Rebbe was attempting to give her the feeling that he's never going to look at her as this dark, scary soul. You know, I have to avert my gaze from you because you're from the weird ones and you freak me out. You make me feel queasy and creepy. He will look at her forever as a shining light of Hashem, as an ambassador of the divine in this world, who was sent down to this world with infinite power and fortitude, and was sent into a very deep place of darkness in order to reveal God's light there. The Rebbe reminded this woman that she is an ambassador of God, not a victim of the devil. What a gift. That's why he told her mother she was in no dark place from which I had to take her out. He didn't want her to see herself as the embodiment of darkness. Yes, she struggled with darkness. Yes, darkness existed in her system. But that's not who she was. She's not a piece of darkness. She's a piece of light. A soul is called a chelik elokam imal. It's a piece of infinite light. The body as well is godly. You are larger than your trauma. You are larger than your darkness. You are larger than your anguish. You are larger than your mental challenges. You can contain it. You can make space for it. Until today, I want to tell you, this woman has many challenges, but she lives with a deep sense of purpose and joy and inner dignity. It's amazing. This is not about denial. It's not about being naive. On the contrary, this comes from a broad and truly deep and divine perspective. I don't run away from trauma. I don't run away from pain. I don't run away from mental illness. I have the courage to look at it in the eyes and to see the pure light of these souls struggling with something they did not choose. We, all of us, parents, educators, teachers, rabbis, spiritual leaders, laymen, laywomen, all of us need to enhance our paradigms. We have to become aware of people's issues, and we have to be able to talk about it with honesty, with authenticity. Talk about it to ourselves. Talk about it to professionals. Talk about it to loved ones and with loved ones. It's fascinating. I always tell my students, what's the first thing the Torah says is not good? It's not good. You would think the Torah would say, murder is not good, right? Stealing, promiscuity, adultery, paganism, idolatry. Yeah, these are all not good things. But what's the first thing the Torah says is not good? You know, if you read Genesis, the story of creation is always about God saying, this is good, this is good, this is good. Every day when he finishes creating those creations that were created that day, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he says, God saw what he did. It was good. It was good. It was good. Everything is good. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful world we live in. But then the Torah says, Loi tov. The first thing that's not good. God says, Loi tov heyois ha'adam levadoi. It's not good for a human being to be alone. Today we call it attachment disorder. We need attachment. We need connection. It's not good for people to be alone. It's not good for teenagers to be alone. It's not good for children to be alone. It's not good for young adults to be alone. It's not good for middle-aged or the elderly to be alone. And the first thing that takes us out of solitariness and loneliness is relationships, communication, openness. I could be present with my real self, and you can be present with your real self, and we can be vulnerable together, because it's the answers that divide us, it's the questions that unite us. Which brings us to a second point. Parents, educators, teachers, pedagogues, mentors, leaders, and every father and mother have to be attuned to what their children and students need today based on who they are at this moment. Don't try to create a child who will make you look good and make you feel nachas and make you feel proud. Don't try to force your child to look good so that everything appears normal in the family and everything appears perfect. Don't allow yourself to surrender to that type of superficiality. My goal is to allow my child to discover his or her own depth, his or her own soul, his or her own beauty, their creativity, and their own intimate relationship with God. I want to make my child believe that he or she is more powerful than all of his or her trauma. They may have chains, but their souls and willpower are more potent than the chains that life placed upon them. How do you give youngsters this type of confidence, this type of power? By loving them unconditionally and by being proud of them, by making them feel and understand how valuable they are to you, to God, of how much God believes in them, even when they don't believe in themselves, of how awesome and perfect and beautiful they are in the core of their being that nobody can take away. And seeing that beauty in them presently in their journey. We need to show our children and teach them by example. They don't have to fear their own challenges because we don't fear them. They can talk about it, they can look at it, they can share it with us. Never allow your children's choices, your teenagers' choices, young adult choices, to be seen as a personal affront to you. Don't take them personal, and never ever sever the relationship. Keep the bonds as strong as ever, and if your child is struggling, you need to become closer to them and more connected to them. Talk to experts who will help you, but only experts who believe in these children and will help you connect with them in a deeper way. Stop trying to make your child fit in, and do not worry about what relatives who are clueless are going to say, or what this one is going to say, or this one is going to say. Think about one thing and one thing only. What do I need to do for this child, for this teenager to be able to flourish and to be able to blossom and to be able to maximize his or her glorious potential and to be able to get in touch with their infinite dignity, to feel wanted, loved, cherished, accomplished, and most importantly, feel connection. The antithesis of addiction, scientists say, is not sobriety. The antithesis of addiction is connection. Never lose the connection. Never. Sometimes you may say, it's too painful. It's too painful. Just get out of my life. Friends, the pain of losing a relationship with your child is infinitely more than any of the pain they may cause you because of their choices that are difficult for you to look at. We have to go through a paradigm shift here as well. So many of us operate from an external level. I get upset at my child, and I say I'm upset at my child. What's really upsetting me is that my child did not live up to my expectations. My child is making me look bad. I know it's not easy to admit, but go deep inside of yourself and ask yourself, do you think this child chose this path? Every child wants to be close to their parents. Every child wants to emulate their parents. Every child wants to be the pride and joy of their parents. The child is struggling, but I don't look good. And what are my neighbors going to say? What is my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, my uncle, my aunt, my rabbi, this one, that one? And we get stuck in that superficiality and that falsehood. And we make decisions from that place. And there is genuine pain that one has to acknowledge. Dreams that may have been shattered, expectations that may have not been met, things that I really hoped for and I aspired that may not be happening. And that pain you need to acknowledge. You need to have a support system. You need to have somebody that you can sob to about it. It's not easy. These are things we have to acknowledge and feel in our body and feel in our mind and feel in our soul. But don't let the pain eclipse your vision. And don't turn the pain into something idealistic to say, oh, it's not personal. I'm busy fighting for truth, for God. We have to acknowledge and realize that sometimes it's about my own personal grief. I was let down. I had a dream. It was not met, and it's hard. But now I have to ask myself, what does this child need? Ask not what your child can do for you. Ask what you can do for your child. Ask not always what God can do for you. Ask what you can do for God. And my mission here is to be here for this boy and girl to the best of my ability. And it's that type of conversation, that type of perspective that helps bring out the best in them. When you believe in them, they can believe in themselves. But for this, I have to transcend my ego. I have to transcend my trauma. I have to transcend my comfort zone. and be able to ask not what he could do for me, or what she could do for me, but what I could do for them. And finally, we must talk to our children. We must talk to our students, and more importantly, we have to listen to them constantly. We have to talk to them about the dangers of abuse of all forms. Always communicate with them, watch them, listen to them, be attentive to their state of mind and heart from the youngest age, and build unshakable bonds of trust with them. We need in our schools and in our homes conversations about self-regulation, about wounds, about emotional challenges, about meditative techniques or mindfulness techniques, spirituality, prayer, connection to God, connection to your soul, that helps you embrace what is happening in your mind. You know, today we live in a generation, information is everywhere and it's accessible everywhere. The greatest gift of education is to teach a child who he is, who she is, and how I could master my life, how I could become the person I was destined to become, how I could polish my diamond so that it should cast its light on the planet, how I can live up to my true inner calling as an ambassador of God in this world, an ambassador of love and light and hope and healing and authenticity and wisdom and redemption. Never can we allow any of our teenagers feel like outcasts. Don't make ever can a student feel like an outcast, like a loser, like a failure, like a disappointment. Believe in them, because God believes in them, because every one of them is of infinite value. It's true, it's authentic, and if I don't see it, the problem is with my eyes, it's not with them. I need to grow, I need to become humble, I need to learn about God. See each one of them as a particle of the divine, as a particle of holiness, as a fragment of God, as rays of infinity. Make them all feel welcome and embraced and loved. And don't be afraid of their darkness. God is not, because he sent them into it in order to transform the darkness into light. Don't be afraid of their darkness. And the only way you won't be afraid of their darkness is if you won't be afraid of your own darkness. Have compassion for your darkness so you can have compassion for theirs, and then empower them to be able to confront it with your love and with your pride and with your attachment. Friends, I'm sitting here in New York, I'm looking out the window, it's a big snow. So I'll tell you a little snow story. You know, on our roads and our highways in the winter, they're often covered with many inches, sometimes feet of snow. So there's always salting going on, right? They're always salting the roads and the highways so that everybody could drive, and the sidewalks, everybody could walk. It's part of what the city does. There's a problem. With much salt, the roads, the tar and the roads begin to corrode. So after snowstorms, you see ditches, different roads, different highways. So there was once a highway, a very used highway here, and cars driving there all day and all night, but there was a huge ditch as a result of all the snow and all the salting, and the vehicles were falling into that ditch. So they all learned to bypass the ditch, and then the city one day sent a construction worker with his pickup truck to go to the ditch and fill it, fix it, repair it. And this fellow was driving with his fellow passenger who was there to assist him. And he comes to the highway and he sees all the cars, bypassing the ditch, and he just follows their trajectory, he follows their course, and he also starts bypassing it. And his friend looks at him and says, "Chacham, you wise person, you don't bypass it. You were sent here to stop here and fix it and fill it." It's a metaphor for life. All of us have ditches in our lives, in our hearts. We have holes in our hearts, in our homes, in our families, in our marriages, in our relationships, in our schools, in our communities. And our natural tendency is just drive around it, ignore it. The main thing is don't go over it, because you're going to fall right there. Don't let yourself fall into it. Just move around. But friends, if this is my ditch, I was sent here not to run away from it, to fill it, to bring light into it, to bring awareness into it, to bring compassion into it, to help fill it. This is why my soul came into the world. Don't be afraid of the darkness that you encounter in your life. Don't be afraid of the mental challenges, of the anxiety, of the depression, of the various issues that we struggle with in ourselves, in our marriages, in our families, in our children, in our schools. If there's a ditch that you encounter, it's because God sent your soul down here with the resources to be able to help, to be able to give it hope, to be able to bring dignity to it. Don't just drive around it. Look at it and fill it with the light that has been entrusted to your soul. Thank you very much.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.